Well, my job is to introduce the introducer, who then will introduce the panel. So he's hiding over here to my right. He's usually not shy, so I'm not understanding why he's hiding in the corner there. But this is my colleague, my partner, my friend, Cornell Moore. Cornell makes things fun at Dorsey and Whitney, as fun as they can be when you're hanging out with a bunch of lawyers. And he is one of our co-chairs of our diversity committee and initiative, and he's doing a great job of that. We all listen to what Cornell tells us, and he speaks to us in a straight fashion. So without further ado, Cornell.
Thank you so much. They're making this bigger than it really is. Just because I'm bigger than life doesn't really mean that I'm bigger than life. But what's interesting about this panel today is that both of the gentlemen from outside I know very well. I was on the board of Dunwoody Institute, not Dunwoody College, for 32 years. When Ravi Norman I've known since he was about this high. So they asked to get the panel together of two people who could really talk. Not only can they talk, but they have something to say. The things that they say will be of interest because one will talk about getting the workforce ready, and the other will talk about getting the workforce work. Two things. First of all, I thought I was really up on information on both of them when I had their resumes, and I happened to be Googling yesterday, and I noticed that one of our presenters was just named as the 2018 Most Admired CEO of Minnesota, along with Pat Ryan of Ryan Construction. Ravi Norman, congratulations. That was announced on April 30th. It's interesting how you can get to be nominated to be the most admired CEO. They don't have such a category for lawyers, and if they did, I'm not sure I would make it, but nevertheless, it's something to aspire to. Ravi Norman is the CEO of Minneapolis-based Thor Construction, Thor Companies now. He became CEO of Thor in 2009, and under his leadership, the company has expanded into new markets and cemented its position as one of the leading companies in the Twin Cities and Las Vegas. I overheard him say he was in Detroit and Los Angeles, so I guess we probably could add those two things on as well. It is now a full-service real estate company with a worldwide book of business because they did some work in Haiti, if I remember correctly, including development, utilities, management, design, construction, and consulting capabilities. Thor is proud to be one of the largest minority-owned firms in the United States. In 2016, he received the Progress Minnesota Award, which recognizes individuals who invest their time, energy, and ideas in ways that significantly impact job creation, business development, and the overall health of Minnesota business. In 2016, Ravi was named one of Minnesota's most admired CEOs, and again in 2018, now I see, by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal. He received his degree in economics and finance from the University of Minnesota and worked in a number of jobs in banks, Norwest Bank, Wells Fargo, and Highland Banks before joining Thor. Now, Dr. Rich Wagner is another interesting story. He's the president of Dunwoody College of Technology. If you remember, Dunwoody used to be called Dunwoody Institute. Dunwoody was set up by Mr. and Mrs. Dunwoody years and years, in 1913?
14, yeah.
1914. A college to improve, okay. They think I need water. I'm not gonna be here that long. I get nervous when I see people. But in 1914, Dunwoody was set up as a college to teach people trades regardless of race, creed, or gender. Now that said something going way back to 1914. Rich has tended to move that forward, move that needle forward. He's maintained the quality and the overall success of Dunwoody. We were talking earlier, I said, Rich, which programs are slow? He said auto mechanics. I said, auto mechanics? He said, slow in getting students. If you get a degree in auto mechanics or certificate, there's 15, 20 companies waiting for your work. I said, what else is hard to do? It is hard to get construction people. You can't get enough electricians, you can't get enough interior decorators, you can't get enough of this and that. But he said the big thing is now is to get people who understand construction, who understand automobiles, but also understand machines, i.e. computers and artificial intelligence. He joined Dunwoody in 1996 as an electrical instructor and has served in all kinds of roles and became president in 2009. He earned his doctorate in educational policy from the University of Minnesota. He served 10 years in the Navy, which I found interesting, before entering higher education. His services include working as an electrician and a technical supervisor on a nuclear submarine. I give you two gentlemen, and of course, the next person I'm going to talk about, I forgot about Sullivan over there, who is very important. I was going to go into my last introduction. I will do it anyway. We'll give you two people. One's worked underwater, and one's worked above the land. Pretty good, wasn't it?
That was good. That's very good.
I made that up just then. But Jack Sullivan is an employment lawyer here at Dorsey. He advises construction companies and a wide range of other clients on union and workforce issues. He's investigated job site discrimination complaints, pursued contract claims and arbitration proceedings, and defended prevailing wage and overtime lawsuits. Jack brings a very unique and strange background to the law practice and today's discussion. Before entering law school, he worked for 13 years as a reporter and an editor. Jack's journalism career, including being part of the AP press team covering the United States Congress and leading a team of news reporters at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a trio of three who I think will entice you, they will give you some information, and entertain you for the next few minutes. Take it away.
Thank you, Cornell, and thank you everyone for coming today, and in particular, thank you Ravi and Rich for joining us and sharing your experience and perspective on the topics that we're discussing today. Hoping to really focus on two closely related areas. The first, how tomorrow's workforce is being prepared for the challenges that they'll face and ensuring that they have the skills that they need when they're out on the job site. And then Ravi, the second, to discuss practical strategies that all construction employers can have when they're working to improve diversity and inclusion among their workforces and on their job sites. What I thought we could do is just begin with your individual perspectives. Rich, you joined Dunwoody in 1999, and how is what your students need today when they enter the workforce different than what they needed in 1999?
Wow, that's an easy question, huh? So how many people out there use building information modeling as part of their construction? You know, so that there's one big way, right? I mean, 1999, I don't think BIM was really being implemented the way it's being implemented across the construction industry. You know, in 1999, the way of building things was kind of the way we've always built things, and I would think in the last 10 years there's been a real big shift in the amount of technology that you're seeing in the construction industry. It's, you know, construction companies are now almost manufacturing companies, right? Because you can build everything you need off-site and bring it in and kind of just put the pieces in place based on the virtual model that you've built. So a few of the things that have changed the workplace and what students need to have going into the workplace is absolutely technology, and that's going to change, right? I mean, what we're using today is going to be different in 5 years and 10 years. I mean, it's really hard to even look out that far and understand where technology is going to drive us. And the other thing that students have to appreciate is really the changing demographics of our workforce. You know, in Minnesota, we're rapidly turning over and becoming a much more diverse populace. So we don't have, we need to educate our students how to fit in and work in a global economy. So you know, between those two things, we've been very busy over the last 15 years or so. And we will be in the future, because I think technology is just going to keep changing at an ever accelerating pace.
Ravi, from your perspective, with when you joined Thor in 2009, how does your workforce look and act and differently today than they did then, and what are their needs today compared to what they were then?
Well, so a couple things. One, I joined Thor actually in 2004, and so I've been there for almost 14 years. It's just the first 5 was kind of an outsourced CFO relationship, but I was there every day, so it felt like I've been there since then. The industry is, although BIM is being implemented and the use of technology needs to happen, and it is happening at the architectural level and at the planning level, there still is a slow adoption of technology when you get all the way down to the craft level. Outside of maybe iPads and tablets being used to look at the blueprints and kind of coordinate activities, that's a big change that I think hasn't hit yet, but is going to be required into the future. If you went into our headquarters deal on southeast corner of Plain and Plymouth, and you went and looked at our job trailer, it would look very similar, I think, to the job trailers that you've probably seen, to Rich's point, over the last 100 years or whatever that looks like. But if you walked into a job trailer 5 years from now, I don't think it'll look anything like what it looks like still today on a lot of the job sites that are there. I actually believe that it'll be like a small NASA center, where ultimately you'll see people in engineering kind of related folks that are controlling semi-autonomous or levels of autonomous equipment out on the job site, which has some huge ramifications when you start thinking about what are going to be the jobs of the future. I mean, our industry has traditionally been one where people felt like, hey, if you're not able to go into post-secondary higher ed, there's this alternative life that you can go into as the vocational trades. And almost felt like this kind of secondary conversation sometimes. I don't feel that way, and the people who have come up through the trades and had legacy pieces there don't see it that way. But it's kind of been that way from a marketing aspect to young people, which is partly why you've had such a problem with 18 to 24-year-olds, I think, wanting to come into the industry. I mean, they kind of, I think I saw a poll that said to the 18 and 24-year-old cohort, they saw construction as like 248 out of 250 in terms of industries that excite them, that they think are cool, that they want to enter into. That's a significant problem. But I will tell you, some of that forecasted labor shortage issue, some of the issues around people not coming into the industry, has also helped to intensify this use of technology and this concept of us having to adopt technology in a much faster pace. But I also see it as some significant opportunities. In particular, I see it for significant opportunities in places and communities where people who maybe traditionally wanted to get jobs in our industry weren't always able to be utilized, like people of color, like women sometimes, who maybe haven't benefited from the traditional mechanisms of vocational training and then getting a job out there. They felt like, I can't get a job. It's kind of been a good old boy network, in particular for white males. There's a new opportunity, I think, that technology in some ways helps to bring as well. Why? Because technology and digital transformation is not always easily embraced by people who've been doing things in an old, mean, and method for a long traditional piece of time. Either maybe from an age standpoint, they don't want to be retrained, or it's more difficult to be retrained, or they just feel like, hey, this is what my grandfather taught me to do. This is the way it should be done. People who haven't been able to participate in that supply chain opportunity aren't necessarily getting the utility traditionally from those models of career pathways, are much more incented to say, I'll embrace a new way. I'll embrace the new technologies because I'm not vested in the old way of doing things. In addition, it's interesting about how technology works just in terms of, it's somewhat inverted to socioeconomics. So a lot of times when you're trying to go through things that may have higher education pieces to them, there's all these components about how education breaks down a lot of times in certain targeted communities. You can see that even in the Minneapolis public school system. But what's also interesting in this technology, digital transformation era, is a lot of the kids that are in North Minneapolis or in South Minneapolis or in concentrations of communities of color that might have socioeconomic issues going on, many of them are on iPhones, they're on iPads, they're on gaming consoles, and I see this, and I can give you an anecdotal example about it. So I'm originally from Trenton, New Jersey, and I go home twice a year, usually for holidays and sometimes in the summer. And when I go home, I have two families that are my aunt's families that, if you looked at their taxable income, they're below $15,000 in reported taxable income, which would be below the poverty line in a lot of ways. There are 11 kids in the two households between 5th and 8th grade. And so I go in there and I spend time with them, so I just observed them over a 2-day period. This is the last time I was there. And they spent 87% of their time, I counted that, wasn't sleeping, on an iPhone or a gaming console. So I found that to be very interesting, that they were actually already there. Because in this whole concept of how do you create pathways and workforce development concepts that lead to careers and sustainable wages, you need passion first, and you need inspiration first, which is where people, what do they believe in, what are they passionate about, and where they're willing to commit their time to. You have to reach people where they are, especially in these scenarios when you're forecasting shortages in a pipeline. You know, how do you find them? Right. Well, here's what I did. I said, wow, they're all here. They're playing now. They happen to spend, out of that 87% of their time, 76% of that was playing John Madden football or NBA 2K. So they weren't working on necessarily the stuff, but it does lead to opportunities of what content transfer could look like if we reach them where they are. So the other thing that kind of went on there that was still anecdotal but interesting was, so the 5th grader and the 8th grader are playing, and the 5th grader's playing with the Minnesota Vikings, old Adrian Peterson team. He ran for 216 yards. And I said, wow, he ran for 216 yards. So I stopped him at the end of the game and I said, listen, it takes 2,105 yards in a single season to break the single season rushing record, right? I said, there was 7 games left in their season that they were playing. How many yards does Adrian Peterson need to average over the next 7 games in order to break the single season rushing record? In 10 seconds, the 5th grader was able to tell me the answer. Now, interestingly enough, he's also failing math in school, right? But that means something. That's really interesting about this workforce of the future, which is we have to reach them where they are. And some of these concepts of educational attainment that lead to certain utilities, you have to be able to put certain content transfer through those platforms. In addition to that, Tom Brady had a concussion, so people were able to learn about it, and they were able to explain brain trauma to me. In addition, they were doing predictive analytics because the defense and offense are kind of trying to predict what the other player's doing. And in between that, they were managing a salary cap, so they were doing managerial econ and all kind of business management pieces. So here's the point that I'm also making. That inverted relationship of socioeconomics in certain communities where a lot of people think, hey, there's an educational problem, there's an intellectual problem, they're not able to produce and be productive, that leads to a career opportunity. Sometimes you have to watch for concealed value, especially in this new era where, there was also a 7-year-old who wasn't in that 5th to 8th grade group. And when I sat with the 7-year-old boy, he was better on the Xbox controller. Now I got, master's degree and I've done all this sophisticated and all these awards, but he kicks my butt every time. And part of it is because I don't have the same level of manual dexterity prowess and abilities on those control systems that the 7-year-old does. And now, so part of what's going to happen in these environments around artificial intelligence and robotics and all the things that are driving kind of the new skill requirement in this new NASA type of environment that I think is coming on a predictive basis, they already have certain baseline skill sets for the operating system. Already, they can take these and actually do things with them that I just can't do, and I'm only 43, so I bet Rich can't do it either, to the extent that they can. And so my point is there's a bunch of assets there. So one, you have this group of people who are less incented to hold on to the old ways of doing things, which is a new paradigm opportunity, and they also have base skill sets for platform understanding of the operating system. So now we could just start using that as a talent in this new age system.
Rich, that reminds me of the conversation we had after the day after what I hope is the last blizzard of the year, when we were talking about just attracting more people to the industry. As I remember, what you said is that construction needs to find a way to be the cool thing or a cool thing for people when they're in high school and when they're really starting to chart their course. What are ways that the industry can do that?
Well, what I would say is, and that's an imperative, because right now it is a talent war, right? Every industry that's out there is saying we need more people, whether it's fighting for construction people, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's in the healthcare fields, you name it. Talent is our biggest, scarcest resource that we're going to have, and it's not going to go away in the next 5, 8, 10 years. So there's something that you got to be thinking about as an industry is how do you make it cool? And we see a lot of those types of applications. We're doing a project on our campus now, and the contractors put together a virtual reality tour of the space, so you can put glasses on and walk through what's going to be the finished space on the campus. So when we have open houses, we can bring in our prospective construction students and show them how technology is starting to change that industry. And I also think we have to think about ways of getting into middle schools, right? I mean, it's the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association already does that, and they're an association of manufacturers, and they have an education committee. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was serving on that. One of the initiatives that they set up to do, actually it's probably 10 or 15 years ago, but time does fly, doesn't it? But one of the initiatives they set out to do was to divide and conquer and look at how the state's broken up into workforce investment areas, and to go into those areas and to make connections through school boards into middle schools and bring in a whole campaign of what was called Make It Minnesota, right? And there's a whole host of other things being done in the construction industry that I'm aware of. But right now, one of the things we don't have is coordination around those efforts. The MPMA was really able to mobilize their association to really get the word out, because they struggle with the same thing, right? I mean, what do people think manufacturing is? It's some guy standing by a vertical lathe in coveralls with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, an incandescent light bulb that's flashing on and off while he's grilling away, and there's, grinding away, and there's metal filings flying all over the place, right? I was just at a medical device manufacturing firm on Tuesday. They won't even let you bring food into the facility because it's too dirty, right? And they're making components that for implants in the backbones and heart valves and pacemakers and a whole host of things. So changing that perception of industry with the realities of what's coming is something we have to do. And the younger people absolutely gravitate towards the technology piece. I mean, I walk around our campus and we have the most connected and yet most disconnected students you could ever think about, because they're all texting buddies and friends at other campuses, and they don't even talk to their classmates, right? I mean, so how do you leverage all of those pieces that everybody has access to create buzz around the exciting occupations, the great pay, the rewarding careers you can have in the construction industry? So I think that industry really rallying together and working in partnership with getting into the high schools, getting into the junior highs, and sending a message, because if your industry isn't, I can name 3 or 4 that currently are. And that's, by the time somebody's in 12th grade, they've made their decision on what they're going to be, right? So we got to get them younger in the supply chain and show them what these careers are and what they're going to be. And I'm with Ravi. The 5-year window in all of our programs that we have at Dunwoody, that's a scary technology window. I mean, it's scary and exciting at the same time. Yeah. It's going to be a whole different deal of what we're thinking about now.
No question.
We're seeing now. So those are some strategies that help create awareness around the industry.
And if I could add to it, I mean, here's one thing I always tell people. You never see shortages in music, entertainment, and sports. And you don't see shortages for a reason. One of them is intentional marketing works, right? So, when I was in junior high school, I wanted to be Dr. J. And then after that, I thought I was going to be able to be Magic Johnson. And then after that, I thought I was going to be able to be Michael Jordan. Now, have you looked at my body type? But I was an MVP basketball player coming out of high school, got to play ball in college and all of that. But I had, in my mind, had connected this concept of what the vision of I was going to be to this hope and dream. Part of it was because I was always had a really intentional marketing model coming down. Dr. J was Dr. Chapstick, and Magic Johnson was Magic, and Michael Jordan was Sometimes I Dream That He Is Me. So those firms, guess what? People had figured out a very intentional marketing opportunity. Same thing happens, by the way, with somebody thinking they're going to be the next Puff Daddy or Jay-Z or whomever that looks like. There's an intentional marketing model that's tied to the hopes and dreams of young people who think aspirationally, I can be like them. I can be like them. But here's the deal. Even if I wasn't this body type, the probability of actually doing any of those things successfully in a professional career as a musician and as a entertainer in the movies and or as a sports is like the same odds as hitting the lottery. The probabilities are very slim. So it's not a real pragmatic piece, but the marketing works. And I went and counted how much time I put into the game of basketball. I think Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 hours it takes to do something at an expert level. I spent 11,635 in basketball. Now, I did that and I spent that much time in it because I had this tie-in that it was going to be part of this great dream for me, and I was going to maybe make it to the NBA at one time. The point I'm making around that is that does not happen in my industry at all. We're terrible at marketing. What we will market to you is a project. So US Bank Stadium or Target Center or Target Field or my headquarters job, whatever. At the end of the day, the industry has kind of been trained to market the project. Well, projects don't necessarily resonate in the dreams for people. People do, which is why people figured out that maybe I should associate these consumable products with somebody like LeBron James, because maybe I'll go buy more Big Macs if LeBron tells me that it's cool. Our industry doesn't do that. You have never turned on a Lego commercial and saw them associating it with some dynamic people in the industry that I'm in, although it would make total sense if there was an intentional marketing strategy. So much so that I sent a letter to the CEO of Lego saying that there's a missed opportunity here, that ultimately one of the ways we could rebrand the industry is that young people already have a little bit of tie-in to what happens with construction, because Legos helps to do that. Anybody ever see the Legos pieces? It talks about a bunch of construction trucks, you can put it all together, but there's no tie-in to a David Mortensen, there's no tie-in to a Pat Ryan, there's no tie-in to the stars of our industry, because our group hasn't put together something that said it's intentional to touch these young people with what we're doing. And we haven't done a good job because historically we haven't done the cool pieces around technology, but that's not true anymore. Over the last 10 years, there has been a lot of advances relative to, especially on the architectural and engineering and kind of pre-construction basis, that has some unbelievably cool technologies. And to your point, VR and virtual reality stuff that's coming into vogue now, because even over the last 2 years, I think it's even been more than the past 24 in terms of the advances of machine learning and robotics and the use of artificial intelligence. But we don't market it today still very well to young people. And so until we get better at intentional marketing, we may not be as good as dealing with those shortage issues.
And just to reiterate, I think about some of the things like manufacturing, Minnesota robotics leagues, right? Kids are building robots, right? And that gets them excited about a whole host of different types of career pathways, primarily in the STEM area, a lot of engineering, a lot of manufacturing, et cetera. And I agree, there's nothing there that is about the construction industry. And so if we want to get more people into our industry, then you're right, it is about rebranding. And how do you present that in an exciting, cool way to a middle school student so that they understand that, man, these are great. That's really what I want to be. That's a cool job to have, right? And Minnesota Robotics League, I mean, in a lot of the high schools in Minnesota, they use Lego kits to build robots, right? And they're marketing, manufacturing, and engineering careers. So it's that whole brand, that whole imaging piece is important to be thinking about. How do we make this the cool career?
And actually, one of the things we did on that same intentional marketing model, so I had our marketing people just film, we call it kind of a day in the life. So we just kind of filmed a day for Richard Copeland, who's the owner, founder of Thor Construction. I had a film of myself. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to be able to market to young people that, listen, when you start thinking about, because some of the things that's cool about the rappers and was cool about some of the sports people is young people see a lifestyle that they think is really cool. I'm gonna be able to jet set around the world. I'm gonna be able to go on vacations. I got great, nice cars. So I said, listen, I'm gonna do something for these young, and we actually wound up running this at North High. I said, I'm gonna just do a day in the life, because I want them to know that in my industry, depending on now, there's a bunch that has to happen to get to those end outcomes, but I jet set between Detroit and Orlando and abroad, and I think we're living relatively okay. We're not living as well as Cornell Moore, but we're living okay. Right, true, that's true, Cornell. But being able to show them, you can realize some of those dreams that you're looking for, even though it may feel superficial, I'm telling you, as part of what draws people to those other industries when there's not a lot of probability or pragmatic success for professional attainment, the reason you get young people into them is because some of those superficial things that they think, that's the way I'm going to make $1 million. That's the way I'm going to get to travel the world. That's the way I'm going to get to have the nice car. That's how I'm going to get the nice girl. I mean, that's kind of what works mimetically in young people. So I wanted to show them that, listen, you can do this through successful entrepreneurship in my industry to have some of those same accoutrements.
How did that work? Did you get a lot of feedback from
Well,
students? Or?
once they saw that, they're like, hey, I think I'm a little more interested in your industry. Yeah. How did you do that? That was kind of the next piece of, well, how do I get into your business? How do I become a successful entrepreneur? How do I do this? And that's what you want to kind of prompt for them, just enough to kind of get them inspired enough to say they're willing to believe it, be passionate about it, and commit some time to it, and have an aspirational vision around it. Because then I can give them the other detail. Because usually when I start with the other detail, this is where I went to school, this is how I did this, you can kind of see the glazed over look and the disinterest sometimes. Like, okay, I don't want to, you know. But the minute I say, hey, you want to be able to travel the world? Huh? Oh, you mean I want to have a really nice, be able to attain certain things in this capitalistic society that you're looking for? Huh? Money? Some things just resonate for young people. So I grab them, then I can tell them, this is how you get there. This is the pathway.
You know, it's impossible for some of us to think of Thor and not think of the U.S. Bank Stadium and the participation success that the company had and that Mortensen had on that project. How did you do that? How was Thor able to exceed the targets for that project, and what were the keys to making that happen?
So I always say intent, infrastructure, and investment you get what it's an intentional consequence, right? So the intent piece is really important, which is at the end of the day, we're not in the business of good faith effort. We're not in the business of even meeting goals. The intent is how can you maximize participation and inclusion in the supply chain, both from a procurement standpoint, which is suppliers, vendors, subcontractors, and also labor. So you have to start with a level of what is the intent beyond the people who can move things through and allocate opportunity through the supply chain. So that's the one piece. Then it's an infrastructure piece that has to do with how information gets exchanged. Because oftentimes, one of the things that hurts access to opportunity is there's a bunch of asymmetries that go on. So you get nepotism, you get kind of a homogenous group that has access to information that others do not. So we've opened up that infrastructure in a way that says there's going to be an exchange of information that everybody's going to have access to, and we're going to be really intentional about that. Then there are things like meet and greets and the timing of disclosure of the opportunity. So it's not just the asymmetry of the disclosure by disclosing it to everybody. You also have to do it early enough so we can be coordinated with the supply side, vocational, human capital development, workforce ecosystems that allow us to then synchronize the timing of when the opportunity is going to create itself. And so that's another piece of the infrastructure. And then, just overall making that investment. Now, I will say this, we're a union contractor, right? So as a union contractor, the unions are going to play a role in the labor supply chain, right? We're not going to just, although we have a very important role in that too, being able to say to the unions, sponsor people into the unions, make sure that the unions themselves are thinking about these are not something that is going to be, again, a good faith effort on that intent side. We have to do this, and we're going to maximize participation and inclusion. It's amazing that when you have that, how the ecosystem starts to work itself out. So, before Kevin Lindsay and he's the Commissioner of Human Rights, who came out with the 32% goal for minority workforce, 6% women, the market went crazy when he put that out. It was, traditionally, we've only been able to do 16%. It's always a supply side constraint. There's not enough people coming through that supply side for us to be able to make those type of goals. So this is how the intent piece makes such a significant difference. It came out literally we're like the first mega project that came out after that new standard was created by Kevin Lindsay. Oh, no, there's no way it can happen. Well, because we had already done it successfully for many years together, the relationship with Mortensen, predominantly its most value has come from them recognizing who we were as a great contractor, but us also showing and bringing models that made Mortensen better in terms of their participation and inclusion and how they thought about it. And they were smart enough from an intent side and strategy side to say, we see this as a differentiation. And really, they, even without projects that we're on, have continued to adopt some of that best practice, because that intent piece moves the rest of the model. And we were able to do it right out the gate. I mean, we did 37% on the minority side. I think we did 9% on the women's side. So it wasn't something that was just, oh, it's a supply side constraint, there's nobody out here, where are they, there's no capacity. Once you made the intent to make it happen, and then we had done that too, for long periods of time. We had been working with the Dunwoodies and the Summit Academies for decades. So we had built relationships over time too, because some of it is also knowing, we can go back to people that we've worked with before and say there's this great opportunity, and people on the supply side saying, I want to go to an opportunity that Mortensen and Thor are a part of because they traditionally have been the leaders in the marketplace and have created opportunities for us. So it's this kind of intent, infrastructure, and kind of sustained investments. Because sometimes when the new person comes out who hasn't done that traditionally, people are a little more shy. Well, maybe that's not really going to work out for me very well. But in a Mortensen and, of course, Thor relationship, people were able to understand that this is what the culture is going to look like on our jobs.
It's interesting that you mentioned the participation goals, because I think for a lot of companies, when those were announced, they seem to be a math problem for which diversity is the solution somehow. Like, how do you get over the number that is the target? But tying back to something that you said before, broadening the diversity of your recruiting sources and the people who might be coming into the company is really a way to solve an entirely different problem, which is who's going to be working on these job sites in the future? Where are those people going to come from? And how do you tap into those communities?
Yeah, so the demographic shift doesn't lie. Mathematics is not, you're just not going to be able to just get it done with Swanson, Swinson, and Johnson much longer. You're going to have to be able to go intentionally into these other markets of people of color and women and emerging populations to be able to make this work.
Absolutely.
Which brings us, I think, to the YCAP program. It'd be great if you could explain what that is and talk a bit about what that program has brought to Dunwoody and to the industry.
Sure. So last night we celebrated our 30th year of offering the Youth Career Awareness Program, which was a program that a visionary master electrician had. His name was Leon Rank, and he was, I think, one of two African-American master electricians in Minnesota in the 1960s. And he just saw, he was a graduate of Dunwoody, and he saw this need to provide mentorship and support for students of color to get into the different trades. So his vision was to create a program where we would do intentional outreach to primarily Minneapolis public schools. We'd identify underserved, underrepresented, under-resourced populations, and we'd provide a high school component to this program, which we've had to scale back a little bit on because it gets to be pretty. Talk about sustainable investment. The investment has to be sustainable, right? So we backed off to just a couple of grades, 11th and 12th grade in high schools. But what it's about is connecting young people with mentors and role models in different industries, from construction to manufacturing to automotive, to keep those role models with them as they go through the rest of their high school program. So we have attendance requirements, we have the parents get involved. And in that program, we've probably served about 2,000 students. And now those 2,000 students that we've been connected to, we've graduated close to 92% of them from high school. So when you compare that graduation rate to kind of the typical graduation rates for students of color in the Minneapolis public school system, that's a significant increase. And it just shows you the power of mentorship and relationships and positive role models that can have in a person's life. So then what we'll do is we'll take those students over there junior to senior year, and we'll tour them out into all the different industries. So we take them to, typically, and we probably should rethink this, construction sites. Maybe we need to think of how to get them in front of some cool construction technology that kind of speaks a little bit different than the job site of the future of the program. But we did go to construction sites, manufacturing firms, a whole host of different things. And we also help students assess where they are academically through the AccuPlacer test. So you get a sense of how strong am I in math and reading and computer literacy and those sorts of things. And then we help them map out a senior high school component that gets them, if they're deficient in any of those skills or they need some work in math or whatever, we work with them to get those skills. Then they come back for another summer program where we give them a college-level course. We continue career exploration. And the hope is that they decide to enter into one of those careers, and then there's a scholarship waiting for the students. So financially, there's a little bit of a burden, but it's not going to be an obstacle or a barrier. They're going to be able to get through Dunwoody. But it doesn't stop there. Then there's a coordinator who then works with the students through their time at Dunwoody. So we continue to provide the academic support, the social support, whatever the students need to be successful. And then hopefully after 1, 2, or 4 years, depending on the type of program the student's in, we're going to graduate that person out and push them out in the industry. So we've been that vision that was created some 30 years ago, it's just incredible how much of an impact that's had on so many people's lives. And it's a program we're excited about. And we've also expanded into a new initiative for women in technical careers, where we're reaching out to bring more women into non-traditional careers. And that's a program that was another vision by a board member that it's tough for a woman to come into a male-dominated occupation, right? And you might be one of 2 women in the auto program or the construction program, but it's really powerful on a monthly basis to bring the women together into a cohort to talk about what are the challenges you're seeing here, what are the things we should talk to the administration about, because maybe there's some things we could do better to make them more welcomed and fit better. And then what we'll do with that program is we'll bring in speakers every month to talk to the women. So we've brought in women leaders in the construction industry, the manufacturing industry, students that have just graduated and might be in their first year in the apprenticeship program in the electrical construction, and they'll talk about perseverance in the industry, the rewards of the industry, and provide that mentorship. And a third one that we just launched this past year is in the construction programs. It's called the Construction Career Pathway. And the driver behind that was Mike Hansen, who's Hunt Electric, if you're local, right? And Mike had this vision of, it's not enough to hit numbers, right? It's not enough to put whatever 30-some-odd %, 6% on our job site. It's what happens to those people next in their career pathways, and how do we reach out to somebody that may have been on a job site as a laborer and was really good, but now that job site's done, they don't have anywhere to go. How do we bring them into an academic environment and put them through a program that helps them have access to the great career pathways that are available in construction? So between those 3 initiatives, we're doing a lot of outreach to help face the inevitable, right? I mean, yeah, demographics don't lie, right? I mean, things are changing in Minnesota, and we've got to figure out a lot of things around K through 12 education. We got to figure out a lot of things in our workforce. We got a lot of dynamics that are in play here. If we ignore those things, we're not going to be the same demographically today. In the next 5 years, we change radically. By 2025, we change even more. And by 2030, it's really a different state. And how are we preparing for that? The companies that are leading edge in that, like Thor, right? They have access to the future workforce, right? And that's part of your solution, is you got to be creative around embracing those changes and getting active in those communities and being the voice of the construction industry.
And technology, honestly, has helped us in this kind of model. So yeah, we had the intent. I talked about infrastructure earlier. You probably even remember, Rich, I was at the forefront of how technology can help deal with fragmentation on both procurement and labor with our STAR system many years ago. In fact, we were trying to look at doing something collaboratively with Dunwoody at one time around that. Well, we kept that going. Our STAR system was an acronym for Strategies for Transparency and Asymmetric Relationships. I don't like saying that a lot, that's why I did STAR, right? But what it really was aimed to do was, we found that this timeliness of the disclosure that I mentioned earlier for both contract opportunities and for jobs is kind of critical to get it out early. What is the opportunities that are going to be created? And this was just in Thor. I was making the case that this should be done at a regional level, which is why I thought Dunwoody would have been a great partner, because everybody needs kind of one informational infrastructure that you can kind of see what are all the contract opportunities that are happening in the construction industry? What are all the job opportunities that are being created in an informational database? Not only is there timeliness of the disclosure of what that opportunity is, but every single opportunity has granular criteria. So in addition to the timing of the disclosing, and I thought the technology could also get into what are the variables around what it takes to be awarded the opportunity, whether on a contract basis or the job. You can get into the specific attributes that it takes to be selected from the supply side. Then there's a whole capacity building developmental ecosystem that's out here. But unfortunately, if Rich isn't tied very closely into the places where my job opportunities are, guess what? There's going to be a disconnect. He may even have some great curriculum and great programming that's going on. But if it's not really tied to what's happening really with us in terms of the timing of our opportunities and the granular criteria that we're demanding for how we're going to hire somebody or how we're going to hire an entrepreneur, then you have this kind of inefficiency that gets created through that asymmetry. So those were three pieces that I thought a technological solution could work, and it has worked at Thor. It has enabled us to be better at it, not just with emerging populations either, just in general. We're just better at being able to really do a good job of getting our information out there on what the opportunities are, of being able to kind of then translate and share what those real criteria, I don't need to be like the guys sitting in my conference room or in some secret thing behind the door are the ones who tell you what the attributes are and nobody really knows what it takes to actually get awarded or get the opportunity. I believe that transparency is critically important. And then being able to connect to the rest of the ecosystem players. So we have a really close relationship with Summit Academy where we're using our technology platform to feed Lewis King in that operation. So he can then synchronize what's the timing of what's going to come out, what am I teaching, and how does it tie into what Thor's demanding. That's what the industry as an entire region should be doing, and technology can help that happen.
That's interesting. So how broadly has that been rolled out? Are you doing that with your own subs or through the company as a whole? Or?
Yes, we do it across our platform, and we're in 7 states. But I'd like to see it be something that happens just on a more, the AGCs or some other big players, to me, who everybody's already a part of and is already a member to, should be rolling those type of infrastructures out, in my opinion. Because it will help the intermediation process. A lot of people think that we don't want to share that kind of stuff because there's some real trade secret that is going on. But the honest piece of it is the industry has such shortages that nobody, by holding it by themselves, is going to be able to win. Because as much as I have this differentiated model for doing it, there's still only so much volume that I can process through Thor. Mortensen is doing $3 billion, right? I'm doing 300 million, right? Those are big differences in terms of scale and the kind of job opportunities that can be created. If Ryan and Mortensen and Thor and everyone else decided to say, this is an industry problem, that's the scarcity in the labor forecast, which everything I go to, I hear every industry leader tell me it's such an industry problem, but then we don't want to come into an industry type of environment solution because we want to hold on to our trade secret. And the trade secret is not that dynamic and it's not that differentiated, in my opinion.
How does the industry make that step? Like who needs to take the lead on that to get that to happen?
Well, I am taking the lead on it already, and I'll continue. It's a marketing enhancement for us. And to Rich's point, we continue to make an affinity relationship with some of the supply side people on both the labor side, workforce side, and on the contractor side. And I'll continue to get bigger. I won't be 300 million. I will be 3 billion. So if people are going to sleep on it, I'll just continue to incrementally grow my company, and hopefully I'll do it at a pace that's faster than what our current growth strategy has been, because people are missing the boat in some ways.
Chime in?
Of course.
Patrick Davis, Senior Construction Manager for Target. Target thinks, everyone knows Target.
Yep.
Target logo, third most popular name logo in the world, between the top behind Mercedes and Nike sign, Target. Target has just launched, and we think these are some of our partners as well. Thor is one of our
No
GCs,
question.
and we
Yep.
recruit out of Dunwoody. So in construction, our VP, Steve McCready's, we partnered with a former Target team member and created a website, constructreach.com. So we literally just launched this on Monday and Tuesday. So it's constructreach.com. And what Target is going to do under Construct Reach is across the United States. We have 65 general contractors. We went out to the AGCs, the unions, schools, accountants, CPAs, and all of our GCs. What we're doing to help combat this workforce of tomorrow and the shortage and the discrepancies on diversity. What we're doing to improve that is this website is a database with all of our general contractors and those partners. Another profile in that same database is interns. It's going to be open to high school students, interns, as well as the tradesmen, because the tradesmen is the shortage. Like we say, the population of women, 50% of the population is women. Only 9% is in the construction industry.
Yeah.
African American is 12%, only 6% in the industry. So what we're doing is reaching out to our partners on their connections. And
That's right.
as we recruit through them, every GC, not even in the target program, will be able to go to constructreach.com, be qualified, get under that same umbrella. As a person comes off a project who doesn't have a job anymore, they could look at our map with these GCs, look what jobs they're actually, opening, and travel the world, like, travel the United States.
That's right.
That's it.
And interesting enough, if you ask Steve McCready's, I presented the STAR model to Mark Stedman and Steve McCready's 10 years ago. And it is. And so part of that for me was, okay, well, I'm trying to give it out to as many people as possible because, again, I wasn't trying to hold on to the trade secret. And, of course, with Target, I was trying to get some identification of who brought the intellectual capital to the table around this, so give me some more work, right, as a mechanism. And if I was really smart, I would have just kind of patented it all, kind of licensed it to them now, because 10 years later, they're doing that same idea. But right, I should have, Cornell was Cornell's job. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. But no, seriously. So I'm glad to see that that's what's happening because it does take that adoption.
Richard and Art from Thor was at our launch.
That's right.
We did the launch, a pre-launch with in-house and the launch between our GCs. So more to come. So keep that in mind, constructreach.com.
Yeah.
What are the metrics you're going to be using to measure the success going forward?
So, of course, with that database, if a student, so like you said, to make kids aware, with going back to the schools, I actually happen to be on the board of directors for Cookie Cutter, that nonprofit workforce. There, I'm actually going to take them on the work site visit with me, not just to the construction department, store planning, marketing, communications. So we're going to track it as, to get interns and kids on that profile, where if they even stay at GC or Target, if they stay in construction, great, but we gotta start young, like those two said, we actually need to get to that middle school. So we're gonna be doing tours. I know Art, he's gonna be, and he invited me for next week to go to Roosevelt.
Yes.
High school's right there, and I'm gonna go attend one end of May at South. But to track it, it's almost gonna be giving the opportunities for others to join in this and help spread the construction is more than just ditch digging. It's a career.
And I think the metric in itself will also come in the fact that when you're talking about shortages, you're saying that I have demand opportunities that can't be filled by the supply side. So I have these open positions, right? That's kind of what the shortage model looks like. One of the best metrics is going to be you have an opportunity and a job, and it's filled by somebody who's skilled and talented and competent and can perform the work. I mean, that's about as great as the metric gets. And on the other side, it's I'm creating wages, sustainable wages, income, and I have a career promotional opportunities that I might be able to get to whatever I'm aspirational to. I mean, those are the kind of things that you can measure. I mean, there's a qualitative metric to it as well, but that's an easy quantitative piece to measure.
And you've built access to your workforce.
That's
And
right.
And you've got a
That's right.
competitive advantage now and Target's going to have a competitive advantage now, right?
That's right.
And so,
So we'll continue to tap with,
Yeah.
I'll interview your students.
yeah.
And for you, it'll be placements, right?
Yeah, there
get
you
them
go.
trained, get them up, and get them placed.
Although we're at 98% right now.
Right.
So it can't get a whole lot better, but
100.
yeah, that's right. There you
And that
go.
means you just add a new building and a
There
new
you go.
campus.
There you go.
Right? Because you need more.
Right, but as Target increases their spend with construction, increases their spend with second-tier contractors from a diverse standpoint, we'll continue to utilize and grow.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Thor can obtain 30 to 50% diversity.
No
Because
question.
You do it in your sleep, on your jobs. Same thing, we have a GC in California. They get 50% diversity all day. But you go into another market who doesn't. So say we're building a store in Columbus, Indiana. They have no diversity in that union hall. But if they tap into my GC that's there, Taylor Brothers, in that market,
Yeah.
then we start making connections like, okay, what else do you have? Who are your other partners? You can go to Construct Reach and you'll be able to look. And again, we just launched. So we're literally starting to put profiles in for every GC.
And on the fundamental pieces of intent, too. So I always say, if you want to connect the workforce successes, then you also have to have a strategy, I think, around the business successes and the contractors themselves. Because one of the things that has traditionally shown itself to be true in the data is that women-owned businesses have a higher propensity to hire women. And ethnic minority-owned businesses have displayed a higher propensity for hiring ethnic minorities. So guess what? If you give contract opportunities to women-owned businesses and women contractors, and you give contract opportunities to businesses of color, guess what they wind up doing in their supply chains tied to workforce? You wind up getting, that's why when I said you need intent, so you already buy the intent. And through that, you get intentionality that ends up in the investment and in the infrastructure.
And millennials play a big role. We plan to market on Facebook, Twitter, because we literally had a college student look at the site, and he was like, Facebook for older folks, but they use Twitter and
Yep.
Snapchat. So we'll be doing LinkedIn and all the other social medias.
That's great.
I mean, and it is, diversity is not just race, it's not even just gender. There is a cultural diversity and a cognitive diversity to the concept. So I also want to say that this stuff works in rural settings that might be tied to even white males, that there is still the same intentionality, the same infrastructure concepts, the same removing asymmetries, the same removing the fragmentation, so the development and capacity building side can then yield better pathways and better results.
We are down to the last few minutes, so I'd be happy to hear if there are any other questions from anyone or any questions for either of our participants. Yes.
Yeah, one. So Ravi, this one's for you. Recently you wrote an article, I think it was called Our Next Bold North. And it was about, and what you talked about in there, one of the things was that there really was a need for cross-industry collaboration.
Yes.
And so I'm going to ask again, I guess, a little bit more about that. Say, you know, how do you see that happening? Where could it happen more? Or what are you doing now? And especially around the area of experiential learning. So we talked about going out to the schools and talking to kids, and we talked about getting in front of them some way, but is there some way to give them real true experiences in the industry in a new way?
What would be the new way for experiential learning? One is, I think, when Rich talked about the virtual reality concepts and using cool technologies as an example, and I think even Rich had just an epiphany here a second ago about, in lieu of just taking them out and taking them to the job site, that you might be able to take them to the cool technologies, and that in that cool technology, see, the good thing about a virtual reality environment is you can look at 1,000 construction sites and put all kind of content stuff through that platform that can make that learning experience have all kind of stimulating pieces to it that you might not be able to do on just one singular project. So that's one part of it. The other side of it is I try to, one where cross collaboration can work. When someone sees construction, they might see the vertical, but the truth of the matter is that associated with the built environment has all these interdisciplinary functions that are going on at the same time. In fact, a good real estate attorney is pretty important, because you know what, my industry is about one of the most litigious industries you're going to find. So having a good, competent lawyer in our industry is tied to some things that I can walk people through practically. Engineering, architecture, finance. You're not getting things done if you can't figure out how to capital stack a development deal. There's no way I'm doing a $40 million transaction if I don't understand how new market tax credits work and mezzanine works and senior debt works, or if you have a big project like Upper Harbor, how TIF works. Finance mechanisms are already there that can be taught through the platform of real estate development and construction, as an example. There are all types of that going on in business. My industry, as you can imagine, again, if that piece falls and hits somebody on the head, it's a real problem. So insurance is a huge industry around the built environment. How does insurance products work? How does sustainability and energy efficiency and warranty products work? All can be taught just off of taking somebody through a construction site, because it's not just about hammer and nails, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Good
to see you again, Robbie.
Good to see you too, as always.
Keep pushing.
Thank you all. You're going to receive an outreach in terms of an email from Dorsey's continuing education people, one of the things that we'll ask for is ideas for future symposiums. Our symposium is an annual symposium. So, you know, one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to this presentation is, you know, maybe next year we talk about artificial intelligence and robotics in construction. But thank you very much. You've been a great audience.